Welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam stream. We're up to a very interesting section. We're in the Riddle of the Citizen, which is the story of Pranjana, which is an allegory that Narada Muni is telling King Prachinibari in order to talk some sense into him because he's addicted to his behaviors without really thinking intelligently about them. And Narada decided he didn't just want to give him straight philosophy. He wanted to give him something more visual that he could relate to and that would have more of an emotional impact. So he's telling him a fairy tale, basically. He's telling him a story. It's an allegory so it's a riddle where everything in this allegory is analogous to something real. But the basic paradigm of the allegory is there's a king, and that's analogous to you or me, the actual person, the soul. And the king inhabits a city, and that's analogous to the body. And the city belongs to a woman, and that's analogous to intelligence. And the king marries the woman to be able to live in the city. And that's analogous to the soul marrying intellect so that it can exist in physical form. That's where we're up to in the story, very summarized. If you want to hear more details, go to the recorded versions of these streams. You can look over, you can listen to the ones that we did previously. There's a lot more detail, and all of it's really interesting. Today, we got this great section coming up, which is going to talk about the gates of the city and what the gates are analogous to. This city is the famous nine-gated city, which is a mammalian city, I think. I'm not so sure about that, but I'm not so sure what species would be also nine-gated and what wouldn't. But anyway, it's a nine-gated city, so we're going to learn how the gates are configured in the human way and what they are. And it's pretty interesting. And I would really like to get some pretty cool illustrations of this. Great. All right, so let's get started on the city's gates. I can almost, my eyes are weird. Sometimes they almost work and sometimes they don't. When the heat of life made him tired. So the last thing that we heard was, okay, the king and the queen got married, and then they lived together in the city for 100 years. Now they're going to talk about the king's life in the city. When the heat of life made him tired, he would go into the river and play with women who surrounded him as musicians sang here and there. And feeling refreshed, he would return to his main interest, utilizing the gates of his city. So what's this an allegory for? This is obviously an allegory for dreaming. What? Active life eventually makes us tired. So that's when the heat of life makes him tired. The heat is like the sweat. It makes you tired, then you go into the river. And the river is a flow of thoughts. So what happens when we dream is we go into the river of our thoughts. There's women that the king plays with in the river. That means all of the, what is it? The things that we have in our thoughts that we thought were desirable or important, or sometimes undesirable. You may sometimes have nightmares. But the thoughts that have important stuff to them are symbolized by the women that are playing in the river. And then the musicians singing are like the recordings of what we thought about those things during the day, the snippets of the recordings of what we thought. And that's how you get dreams. Dreams are the flow of your thoughts still dwelling on stuff that you had previously thought about, which is the musicians singing about regarding things that you desire, which is the women in the water. It can sometimes be opposite because things you desire to not have. That would be like nightmares. Okay. So when the heat of life made him tired, he would go into the river and play with women who surrounded him as musicians sang here and there. Then, feeling refreshed, he would return to his main interest, utilizing the gates of the city. So his main thing that he wants to do in the city is utilize the city. The city has these amazing gates, which allow him to connect to other cities and interact with things. But when that gets tiring, or when you get tired from doing that, you can sleep. And when you sleep, you can also enjoy. You can enjoy your thoughts about those things. Now, the next part. Now, the rest of this section that we'll cover today will be what are the gates of the city? How does the king utilize them? Of the city's gates, 7 were on its high slope, 2 on its lower slope. 5 faced east, 2 to the west, and 1 each to the north and south. So let's explain this. This is the human configuration, by the way, and this will let you know that this city is a human body and not another mammal's body, although any primate would have this configuration. Hang on a second. That's also incorrect. That's also incorrect because this configuration would also be there. For example, for a cat, they'll have the same configuration. However, you can argue that for cats, dogs, etc., anything lower than monkeys, evolutionarily speaking, you won't have a higher and lower slope to the city. The city will be level in this allegory. Okay, anyway, here's what they're talking about. You have the whole city has 9 gates. 7 of them are on the high part of the city. 2 of them are in the low part. The 7 ones that are in the high part are the gates, like these 2 gates right here, these 2 gates, this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are the high gates. The low gates are 2 gates down there. So there's 9 gates total. 7 are on the high slope, 2 are low slope, like at the bottom of the city. 5 of them face east. So this whole thing with east-west, east is prachin, it means forward. So east is forward, west is backwards, and the north and south is right and left. So it says 5 faced east, 2 west, 1 each north and south. North, south, east, west. So you got 5, 2, 4, 5 facing east, 1 north, 1 south. And then those are considered west. You know, one of them is kind of east, downwardly east. They'll call it west anyway. And there's symbolism to be derived from the direction, which will be implied or explained in the upcoming section. Right, so of the city's gates, 7 were on its high slope, 2 on its low slope, 5 faced east, 2 to the west, and 1 each to the north and south. The gates named Bright and Strong stood together facing east. The king would travel their roads with the help of a friend named Light to enjoy a city named Illuminated Displays. So, Bright and Strong are the names of those 2 gates. And you can exit those gates with the help of a friend called Light. It's actually, this friend is your ability to perceive light. And then that ability to perceive light can allow you to use light to connect, to take the road from that gate to the destination, which is the object that's reflecting light. So then you can enjoy colors, shapes, etc. So that's all clear, right? Of the city's gates, 7 were on the high, 2 were on the low, 5 faced east, 2 to the west, 1 each to the north and south. The gates named Bright and Strong stood together facing east. The king would travel their roads with the help of a friend named Light to enjoy a city named Illuminated Displays. 2 gates named the Tunnels also stood side by side facing east. The tunnels. With the help of a friend named Wind, The king would travel their roads to enjoy a city named Fragrance. So the friend named Wind enables the sense of, what is it called? Olfactory sense, the smelling sense. So to leave, for your consciousness to leave its body. See, what's happening when you perceive color, for example, is your consciousness leaves your body or flows out of your body through a gate, through your eyes, taking a road called light to get to a city called the object, which is being illuminated. Now, if you want your consciousness to flow through these gates, then you need to do that with air or wind. And where you'll get where can the consciousness go from those gates? It can go to fragrances. So the city that's at the end of that road is named Fragrance. Of the city's gates, 7 were on its high slope, 2 on its lower slope, 5 faced east, 2 to the west, and 1 each north and south. The gates, named Bright and Strong, stood together facing east. The king would travel their roads with the help of a friend named Light to enjoy a city named Illuminated Displays. 2 gates called the Tunnels also stood side by side facing east. With the help of a friend named Wind, the king would travel their roads to enjoy a city named Fragrance. The main gate also faced east. That's this. 2 roads emerged from it. That's why it's the main gate. And it's pretty damn big. Compared to all the rest of the gates, this one is huge. That's the name for this gate is Main Gate, the big gate. 2 roads emerged from it. One the king would travel with the help of the trader to enjoy the exchange. To enjoy the city of exchange. Yeah, give me a second. I'm going to just do the same format for each one. The city illuminated displays to enjoy the city. Fragrance. That looks nice. To enjoy the city of exchange. So this main gate has 2 roads coming out of it. One, the king travels with the trader to enjoy the city of exchange. The other, he travels with the help of the taster to enjoy the city of feasts. This is clicking. All right. So what are these 2 roads all about? With your mouth, what can you do? You can do 2 things. You have 2 senses in the mouth. And if you think that's a lot, it's not. This also differentiates primates from non-primates. Non-primates have 3 things in the mouth. They also have the thing called the shaper, which is the hand sense. Or elephants actually have it in their nose. But anyway, the 2 things humans do with the mouth. And this differentiates the human from the ape. The ape doesn't speak. So the ape actually only has 1 road exiting the mouth. So in the human city, there's a main gate with 2 roads coming out. I don't know. This was just maybe not interesting to you, but I've had a background question ever since about a year ago when we started looking at this. Was when they introduced this city of 9 gates, they said, it was human, and the shape of the city shows that it's a human. I never fully figured that out, but now I think we're figuring it out. How this particular shape of this city can only be a human. Can only be analogous to human species, human bodies. So you got 2. You can speak and you can taste. 1 road actually, you can think of it as 1 road comes in and the other road goes out. You can think of it that way, but that might not be so helpful because consciousness has to flow both ways on any of these roads. So the road that's for speaking, the the consciousness can flow through that with the help of somebody called the trader. And it goes to the city of exchange, because this is what you'll do on this road, is you'll exchange your consciousness with other consciousness. So, consciousness can get codified or tokenized or symbolized, encapsulated into words. For example, we can express our experiences in words. So we can put our feelings in words, we can put our thoughts in words, etc. Consciousness can fit somewhat inside of words. Words can kind of work like envelopes, which can package consciousness and send it. So what we can do with the mouth, with the help of this guy called the trader, a person who knows how to exchange things, we can put our thoughts, our feelings, etc. into these little packages, and the trader can send them out on this road to the place where they can exchange with other packages. So in other words, what a human being can do is they can uniquely share their inner operations. We can uniquely share our inner operations, how we're thinking, how we're feeling, etc. Much more than is possible in subhuman species. That's another reason why it's called the main gate. It's not just because it's big, but because it's very important. And the simple one is for the city of feasts, with you travel with the sense of taste. You ready? Keep going. So what I like to do today is I'll keep starting at the top because it's an allegory. So after I explain one section, we'll go back to the top, and hopefully you'll keep remembering what each thing was about. When the heat of life made him tired, he would go into the river and play with women who surrounded him as musicians sang here and there. Then, feeling refreshed, he would return to his main interest, utilizing the gates of his city. Of the city's gates, 7 were on its high slope. Should I say end? 2 on its lower slope. 5 faced the east. 5 faced east. I mean, 2. Yeah, 5 faced east, 2 to the west. Keep it. 5 faced the east, 2 to the west, and 1 each to the north and south. The gates named Bright and Strong stood together facing east. Bright, Strong stood together facing east. The king would travel their roads with the help of a friend named Light to enjoy the city of illuminated displays. 2 gates called the Tunnels also stood side by side facing east. With the help of a friend named Wind, the king would travel their roads to enjoy the city of fragrance. The main gate also faced east. 2 roads emerged from it. One the king would travel with the help of the trader to enjoy the city of fragrance. The other he traveled with the help of the taster to enjoy the city of feasts. Facing south. So what's south? East, north, west, south. Facing, so we're going to talk about this now. The only gate that we have on the left side. Facing south was a gate called Ancestor Summoner. The king's friend, Sonic Memory, would take him through this gate to a country called Fives. So it's not a city over here, it's a country. This is our left ear. Sonic memory is the ability to learn. So that's the main function of the ear, is to learn. You get information through the words. They come out. So actually other people's, the road from exchange, the stuff that's being sold in the exchange where you communicate with is gathered from the open country called the Fives. And you can pick up those parcels from the country of the Fives via your ears. So sonic memory goes through this gate to a country of 5. Sonic memory is the ability to learn. It takes us to an open country where we learn information about the 5 types of experiences that are available: sonic, visual, tactile, olfactory, and gustatory. I think gustatory is the right word. Taste experiences, smell experiences, uh, feeling experiences, sight experiences, and sound experiences. The ear will go and collect information about those. So the ear is the one that informs intellect what exists out there, and then the intellect uses that information from the ears to decide what other gates it wants to go out and where it wants to go at those gates. So that's why ears are called the educator, the shrutadar, the student, the one who's learning. Because it will learn for the intelligence. So it will educate the intelligence, and then the ear educates the intelligence, and then the intelligence directs the senses. So really, the ears are directing the senses. The one on the left is called Ancestor Summoner, and I've somehow edited this out of explaining it. And this is because the left ear supports the east. It supports the thing to its right. So the left ear supports the east, the right ear supports the west. So the left ear supports acquisition, and the right ear supports minimalization, or decrease. The left ear supports increase, and the right ear supports decrease. So it's called Ancestor Summoner because you learn about things which have already existed, material things. And from the right ear, it's going to be called the God Summoner because you'll learn about things which are beyond. So let's just go right to that one. Facing north was the gate named God Summoner. Through this, sonic memory would take the king to the northern fives. So both of these gates, the one on the left side and the one on the right side, they're unlike these two gates in one sense, is that these two gates are physically close together. But both of these gates, they have one operator. Both of these gates have one operator, and the same thing with these. Both of these gates have one operator. True to dark. What is he called? Sonic memory. But they both have the same operator, and just like both of these gates go to the same city, both of these gates go to the same city, both of these gates go to the same place, even though they're on different sides of the city. But this one goes to upper five, and this one goes to lower five. So the Ancestor Summoner goes to more conventional, learn about conventional things, and the God Summoner goes to learn about more elevating things. That's why when you receive materialistic mantras, you get it, the Guru gives it to you in this year, and when you receive spiritual mantras, the Guru gives it to you in this year. So the God Summoner is the right ear. From this, we learn about higher types of experiences, which lead to spiritual evolution. Cool. Any questions? I'll review from the beginning, and then we shall continue to the lower gate. When the heat of life made him tired, he would go into the river and play with women who surrounded him as musicians sang here and there. Then, feeling refreshed, did I put a comma? I just realized how this could be misread. When the heat of life made him tired, he would go into the river and play with women who surrounded him as musicians sang here and there. Then, feeling refreshed, he would return to his main interest, utilizing the gates of his city. Of the city's gates, 7 were on its high slope, 2 on its lower slope. 5 faced the east, 2 to the west, and 1 each to the north and south. The gates named Bright and Strong stood together facing east. The king would travel their roads with the help of a friend named Light to enjoy the city of illuminated displays. 2 gates called the Tunnels also stood side by side facing east. With the help of a friend named Wind, the king would travel their roads to enjoy the city of fragrance. The main gate also faced east. 2 roads emerged from it. One the king would travel with the help of the trader to enjoy the city of exchange. The other he traveled with the help of a taster to enjoy the city of feasts. Facing south was a gate called Ancestor Summoner. The king's friend Sonic Memory would take him through this gate to a country called the Fives. Facing north was the gate named God Summoner. Through this, Sonic Memory would take the king to the northern Fives. Now the new stuff. A mysterious gate named Overpowering opened to the west. So now there's the lower gate, which is facing west. Through it, the king visited the village of Procreation. It's interesting that it is not called a city. The village of Procreation, guided by the gatekeeper, anti-inhibition. That's the genitals, ladies and gentlemen. So that's the 8th gate. And it's called Overpowering because it completely overrides all the rest of the senses and will focus all of the attention on it. And it is utilized by non-inhibition. So basically, sexuality and inhibition are not friends. It goes to the village of sex, the village of procreation. What's a village is not a city. It's not a fancy place. It's a simple, down to earth, basic place. Because it, just leave it at that. Let's leave it at that. Villages, pastoral, they're more sexy. All right. So that's the 8th and the 9th. A second gate is near the 8th gate. It's just like these two guys are close. These two guys are close. The two gates that are low in the city are also close, but they're not the same gate. Facts. They're very close. Some of us. A second but different gate stood near this one, facing west, named Evacuation, and tended by a gatekeeper named the Eliminator. It allowed the king to deal with a city called Excess. So that's what the evacuatory sense is. And also, I hope this is an actual English word that people understand. Evacuation, evacuatory. The function of the evacuatory sense is to get rid of the excess. So, for example, when you eat food, 40% of it is really important to you, and 60% of it is unnecessary stuff. So it's the excess. So the evacuation gate is where you deal with the excess. So you send it to the city of excess using elimination through that 9th gate, which is called the evacuation. That is not cool. You shouldn't say that. And then well, I am. I'm really into it. And I'll read you this other part. No, this is bothering me anyway. Two other friends also helped the king, named Mover and Shaper. They were blind, but partnered with the king's other friends to help them travel the roads and enjoy their destinations. So who's the mover and the shaper? That's the locomotive and manipulative organs. So we have 10 senses. God, I hope this works out. Let's analyze this. We have 10 senses, 9 gates. So 2 of the gates are for sight. 2 of the gates are for smell. 2 of the gates are for hearing. So with 3 gates, with 6 gates, we cover 3 senses. One of the gates covers 2 senses. The main gate covers taste and speech. Speech is a sense, but an action sense. So speech is covered. Then the overpowering gate or the procreation gate covers the tactile sense. Oh, the tactile sense is concentrated. Tactile sense is in the skin, but the special parts of the skin are the erogenous / procreative skin. So that covers the tactile sense. And then The other gate is evacuation. That's one of the active senses. That's speech, evacuation, procreation. So we have 8 senses covered by 9 gates. So what about the other 2? We actually have 10 senses. The 2 remaining active senses that haven't been discussed is the ability to manipulate or grasp and the ability to move. So these friends are also in the city. They're called the mover and the shaper. They're blind, but they partner with the king's other friends to help them travel the roads to enjoy their destinations. So in other words, when it says that the king uses the evacuation gate, and the gatekeeper that lets him use the gate is called the eliminator. You also have to use mover and shaper to use any one of the gates. For example, you need to go to the bathroom. You need to go to the bath. You need to go somewhere to do it. Or you need to move your body into a particular position. Something like that. So it may not be always in every sense it's mandatory that you have mover and shaper, but the mover and shaper can assist any one of the gates. So like if you want to see something, you may have to move to a location or pick it up, hold it, or bring it closer to you. So mover and shaper, mover is your locomotive sense, which is feet. Shaper is the grasp sense, which is hands. And they can help any operation on any of the senses, but they're blind, means they don't have their own particular gate. Sometimes the king did not feel like leaving his city. Sometimes the king doesn't feel like leaving his city. What does that mean? It means sometimes we don't feel like experiencing new things. But we also don't feel like going to sleep. We're not tired. What happens then? Then we will utilize the 11th sense, which is the mind. Sometimes the king did not feel like leaving his city. When that happened, a friend named Everywhere would help him enjoy his wife, the intellect, who would produce children named Satisfaction, Pleasure, and Infatuation. So this person named Everywhere is the mind. It's called Everywhere because it permeates the entire physical body. So this mind is everywhere, present throughout the entire city. It's the friend that's present everywhere in the city is analogous to the mind. The force, the sensory capacity, the sensory organ, which is everywhere. It's not in a physical location. Called Everywhere. It allows us to experience objects within ourselves. So this sense power doesn't go out through a gate. Rather, it connects to the queen, which is inside the city. So it's a very special sense. Everywhere is the mind. It is called Everywhere because it permeates the entire physical body. It allows us to experience objects within ourselves by uniting with the queen, intellect, to contemplate and reflect. The result of contemplation depends on the mood of the queen. If she's in a placid mood, sattva, then we will experience satisfaction. She produces 3 kinds of kids: satisfaction, pleasure, infatuation. Satisfaction comes from connecting with the intellect when the intellect is in sattva, which means placidity or tranquility or clarity. If she's in a passionate mood, rajas, then interacting with her will produce pleasure. Pleasure, which is harsha, like enjoyment, sensual pleasure. If she's in a languid mood, tamas, then she will produce infatuation, or aka intoxication of fantasy. Fantasy is the best. I may even change the main translation to fantasy. What happens if you don't feel like going out, but you also don't feel like going to sleep? then you'll just think. So that's the king. He's not sometimes not in the mood to go out to other cities, and he's not in the mood to go to sleep. Then he will hang out with his friend everywhere, the mind. And the mind is what connects him to the queen, the intellect. So he will connect to the queen. And then by union with the queen, he gets a baby. The baby will either be satisfaction, pleasure, or fantasy, depending on the queen's guna or her mood. So, in other words, if your intellect is tired, it won't want to initiate any real action. It will want to just make things up. So, the way that we come up with fantasies and the way that we come up with stories is from the creative tamas. The way that we come up with fantasies, or just sitting around daydreaming, fantasizing, is tamaguna intellect, interacting with the tamaguna intellect by the mind. If you interact with the rajaguna intellect, you will be contemplating the things which were giving you pleasures. So you'll be reliving the pleasures. It's different. You would still call it, it's not action, it's still fantasizing or daydreaming, but it's not fantasizing of something that doesn't exist or never existed. It will be probably, with Rajaguna intellect, the intellect has a little gusto to it, so it will be foreseeing future pleasures and inspiring the king to go out and experience those pleasures. That's the difference. If the intellect is in a languid mood, then it's not going to inspire us to go out and be active. It'll say, just experience whatever pleasure you can get right now by not even doing anything. Just imagine stuff in your mind. If the intellect is in an active mood, it will say, ooh, we can get this pleasure, that pleasure, that pleasure. And from that, you get the inspiration to become active again. From tamaguna intellect, you'll get the inspiration to go to sleep. See, so this is like a border between being active and going to sleep. And if you interact with this is really interesting. If you interact with the rajasic intelligence, you'll get inspired to go back out. And if you interact with the tamasic intelligence, you'll get inspired to go to sleep and dream. And if you interact with the sattvic intelligence, you will get inspired to stay there. This is self-satisfying. I feel happy interacting with my queen, the intellect. And I don't need to go out, nor do I need to go to sleep. I'm good as is. The way everything is right now is good. Let's contemplate that. Make sense to you? Any questions? Let me know. That's right. Alf, what's up? Procreation would be an inward sense. Wonder if it depends on whether you're male or female. It's both an inward and an outward sense for both. The female is inward during the conception, but outward during the production. So this procreation sense, both, it's slightly inward for a female, but it's mostly outward because you're at the definition of an outward sense is the sense which has an effect upon the world, and the definition of an inward sense is the sense which has an effect the world. Through this sense, the world has an effect on consciousness. So the two categories of senses is Gyan and Karma. The Gyan Indriya is how the world has an effect on consciousness, the colors, the smells, the sounds. And the Karma Indriya is the way the consciousness has an effect on the world. The ability to manipulate, the ability to move, the ability to procreate, the ability to evacuate, and the ability to speak. Is delusion or mental illness a sense? It's a poor operation of the queen. The queen is operating improperly. If she's often in tamas, or if she's too often in rajas, then the queen won't be very effective in running the city. And you will classify that as a mental illness. So I'm going to read the whole bit one more time. Meanwhile, if you have questions about what's going on. And like I said at the beginning, trying to talk a particular person into illustrating this because I think these could be really psychedelic illustrations. You could illustrate each gate with this. It's very, because it's all very visual. It's an allegory. So I'd really love to see this done well. Like, I don't have a clear picture in my mind, but like eyes, the gate, I don't know, with roads leading out of them to cities. You could do it as a map. It's kind of hard to imagine how it could be done. It could be done in several separate illustrations. If anyone wants to sketch up some ideas of it. All right, one more time from the top. When the heat of life made him tired, he would go into the river and play with women who surrounded him. You could possibly also say he would go into the river and play as women surrounded him, as musicians sang here and there. Then, feeling refreshed, he would return to his main interest, utilizing the gates of the city. Of the city's gates, 7 were on its higher slope, 2 on its lower slope, 5 faced east, 2 to the west, and 1 each to the north and south. The gates named Bright and Strong stood together facing east. The king would travel their roads with the help of a friend named Light to enjoy the city of illuminated displays. 2 gates called the Tunnels also stood side by side facing east. With the help of a friend named Wind, the king would travel their roads to enjoy the city of fragrance. The main gate also faced east. 2 roads emerged from it. One the king would travel with the help of the trader to enjoy the city of exchange. The other he traveled with the help of the taster to enjoy the city of feasts. Facing south was a gate named Ancestor Summoner. The king's friend Sonic Memory would take him through this gate to a country called Fives. Facing north was the gate named God Summoner. Through this, Sonic Memory would take the king to the northern Fives. A mysterious gate named Overpowering opened to the west. Through it, the king visited the village of Procreation, guided by the gatekeeper Anti-Inhibition. A second, but different gate stood near this one facing west. Named Evacuation and tended by a gatekeeper named the Eliminator, it allowed the king to deal with a city called Excess. 2 other friends also helped the king. Named Mover and Shaper, they were blind, but partnered with the king's other friends to help them travel the roads and enjoy their destinations. Sometimes the king did not feel like leaving his city. When that happened, should I also put in, sometimes the king did not feel like leaving his city, nor did he want to sleep and dream. No, I'll leave it like that. Sometimes the king did not feel like leaving his city. When that happened, should I put that in? You won't. Sometimes the king did not feel like leaving his city. No. You're just lucky if you attend the stream. This is something that probably won't come across in the book. That this is a state which is in between going to the river and dreaming or going out the gates. Sometimes the king did not feel like leaving his city. When that happened, a friend named Everywhere would help him enjoy his wife, who would produce children named Satisfaction, Pleasure, and Infatuation. Any questions? Yes. All right, guys. That's all for today. Let's see what's coming up next. Oh, no. There's more for today. Don't leave. The king's relationship with the queen. So it mentioned that it ended up with how he enjoys the queen really via the mind. Now, therefore, he's going to pick up and talk more about the queen. That the queen isn't just someone who he occasionally interacts with when he's not asleep or not going through the gates. See, that could be a misconception. Actually, the queen is the main. He constantly interacts with the queen. It's only through the queen that he can access the friend that lets him out through a gate. It's only through the queen that he can go into the river. So it's only through the intellect that we can go through the senses or go into the dreams. So it's not the case that he only interacts with her when he's contemplative. It's when he's contemplative, then he's focusing on the interaction with her. And it's just like sex. It's like sexual relationship. They are interacting with each other and that's all they're doing. But the rest of the time, when he's doing anything else, he's doing it with the queen. And that's going to be explained here. And it's going to be explained that she is actually the one who has these friends. We already heard that before, right? When he saw her, he saw that she was surrounded by 10 servants or guards who themselves were surrounded by 100 maids. So she has all these friends that he's using to go through the gates. So it's actually her that's doing the gates, that's doing the going through the gates. The intellect is actually the thing which is going out the senses. The consciousness isn't moving. The intellect is the thing which is flowing in and out through the gates, and the consciousness is enjoying its relationship to the intellect. And because of its identification with the intellect, it experiences whatever the intellect experiences through the principle of vicariousness. So let me read you this section. If the queen drank and made merry, he would drink and merry make with her. If she would eat, he ate. And as she chewed, he would chew. If she would sing, he would sing with her. So this would actually be pretty earth-shattering for the king to hear. Remember, Narada's telling the story to a actual literal king. He's telling this allegory to a literal king. Kings don't like to feel like they're puppets. Kings kind of assume that everybody else is their puppet. So now Narada is kind of hitting the king with a little bit of bracing information that this king in the story is actually not the real character. The main character is the king's wife. And the king is actually just following every single thing that she does. If the queen drank and made merry, he would drink and make merry. If she would eat, and he ate. As she chewed, he would chew. If she would sing, he would sing with her. If she would cry, he would cry too. If she would laugh, so would he. If she would chat, he would chat along with her. If she would walk, he would too. If she stood still, so would he. If he lied down, it was because she was lying down. If he would sit, it was because she sat. If she would listen to something, he would hear it. If she saw something, he would see it too. If she smelled something, he smelt it. If she touched something, he felt it. If she was depressed, he was depressed. If she was elated, he was elated. If she was satisfied, so was he. So this is the relationship between the consciousness and the intellect. Consciousness actually assumes that it is the intellect. And so the conditions that the intellect goes through by virtue of interacting with the world, the consciousness assumes that it's going through and therefore it experiences. So when you feel depressed, you are not depressed. You are a conscious being who is experiencing an intellect which is depressed. You're experiencing a queen who is depressed. When you feel depressed, you feel depressed because your intellect is depressed. Similarly, when you feel elated, you're not elated. But because you're watching somebody who's elated, you vicariously feel elated. You're watching the queen who's elated, and you identify so strongly with the queen that you have a vicarious experience of the same exact thing that she feels. So she is affected by the changeable world, and you vicariously feel as if you are. That's the point there. His desire to completely enjoy everything about the queen captivated him. Although he did not intend it, he became her puppet, a plaything, a pet. So it's the soul remember the story was he met this beautiful girl and he wanted to marry her. So he wants to experience her fully. So if she feels itchy, he feels itchy. If she feels smooth, he feels smooth. And so, although he doesn't intend it, he intended to become the man and the husband. But although he doesn't intend it, what actually winds up is whatever she does, he does. So he loses all of his independence. He's not going to like that. So the next chapter is going to talk about his rebelliousness against that. So if your intellect is good, then it's actually good to be directed by your intellect and to just be a puppet of the intellect. If your intellect is bad, you may need to exert some will to educate your intellect. Because you're going to follow your intellect anyway. That's the way the consciousness operates. If the intellect is good, then that's good for you and you shouldn't rebel against it. The king's going to rebel because he doesn't like having become a puppet. Because he's macho. So in this next chapter, we're going to hear about the result of his rebellion against his subservience to the queen. And it's not a good thing. If your queen is not great, then it's up to you to educate the queen. So in other words, if your intellect is not serving you well, then it's up to you to exert the effort to take your ears out to good information that will inform the intellect of better stuff. So the footnote here is because we desire to enjoy a world we can only access through our intellect and senses, we become completely dependent upon them. Whatever conditions affect them, it is exactly as if they directly affect us for better or for worse. Thus, we completely lose all independence. Let's see what's going on here. Why would you say the king is a thief, Mr. Ash? Jonathan wants to know what is will. Will is consciousness. Consciousness is basically identical with will. Because consciousness is experiencer. And what is will? Will is just the direction of the experience. Will is the basic, what will boils down to is what I will experience. So consciousness is will, is the root of the will. So if you want to utilize your will, then you'll try to marry the right queen, or you'll try to make your queen good for you. In other words, you'll try to educate your intellect. That's the best use of the will. And the best friends for doing so are your ears. So you'll kind of take the queen through the ears more often, especially the north ear. Maybe if you just, it depends on what you want to be better at. Maybe through the south ear if you just want to have a more happy, conventional life. But if you want spiritual progress, you go through the north ear to hear things like Bhagavatam and learn these kind of things. That makes the queen really good. And then when you're following her spontaneously, because that's what the consciousness will do, because it's the only way it can operate, you'll be winding up going good places. Mid the loop, the intellect is Mercury, which is multi-gendered. So why is it a queen in this allegory? You need to just listen to the next part of the story, where the king gets reincarnated, and then the queen will flip. When the king will flip, the queen will flip their gender, which is exactly like Mercury, isn't it? So female is provider of opulence and wealth and enjoyment and pleasures and happiness. But when the soul has an attitude of a male, then it wants an intellect which looks like that. And so initially in the story, Narada is describing the soul as a male because he's describing a materialistic soul. And then when this Puranjana, the citizen, dies, he'll reincarnate as a woman, and then the intellect will be male. Men are strong, strict, firm, etc. Provide stability. That type of intellect will be married to the soul, which is feminine and feels itself to be the giver of pleasure, etc., not the taker of pleasure. So this intellect can be either male or female, and it will depend upon the disposition of the soul. And that is actually perfectly analogous to the astrological concept of Mercury being multi-gendered, and the mythology of Mercury and Mercury's consort swapping genders every 6 months. Samurai isn't will ahamkara. No, ahamkara is the initial expression of the will in the material setting. Like I said, the root of the will is in the consciousness, just like the root of vision is in the consciousness. But then, in order for consciousness to experience vision, it needs to extend the power of vision into a mind, into a brain, into a nervous system, into an eyeball. Similarly, the root of will is in the consciousness. But in order for the consciousness to extend or utilize that root of will, it has to extend it into a principle called ahankar, which is an active will. We got Inima de Loop into this fourth canto. Okay, so look at that. Yeah, so the next chapter is going to be cool because we're going to hear about the king's clandestine, independent affair, not liking the fact that he's married to this queen. So that is next week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. I will see you again on Thursday for the next bit.